The Equilibrium dungeon has been out for exactly 1 week now, and in the period since then, it's given us plenty of time to play around with the 6 new weapons that feature in the loot pool. And from my own personal testing and some community discoveries, there's certainly some powerful weapon rolls to be chasing. So today we're covering the definitive god roll guide for the weapons from the Equilibrium dungeon so that while you're doing your farming, you know exactly what to look out for. And if you find today's guide helpful, then a like and subscribe would be very much appreciated. So let's begin. Quickly before we get into any of the actual weapons, it's important that before you start any of your farming, I first recommend you finish the dungeon quest in its entirety, because doing so will unlock the focusing feature by the Praxic altar inside the temple. And it's here you can focus any weapon or armor piece of your choosing. So make sure to take advantage of this if you're considering target farming a specific item. Furthermore, in order to guarantee that every drop from your runs are tier 5, I recommend farming exclusively 4 feet runs minus the cutthroat combat modifier, because doing so will max out your reward scalar and grant tier 5s from every single loot source, including the secret chests, which by the way are also infinitely farmable and are influenced by your focusing choice. Anyway, let's get into the actual weapons, starting with the Zealous Ideal. Zealous Ideal is a solar balanced heat auto rifle that fires at 450 rounds per minute, putting it in the same family as weapons like Prosecutor, Shadow Price, and Tiger Spite. With the weapon being a balanced heat weapon, while at high heat you're able to perform a perfect vent to quickly cool the weapon down, and without ionized heatsink the weapon is able to fire 56 bullets before overheating. Taking a look at the perks, starting in the left column we have Heal Clip, Zen Moment, Gut Shot Straight, Delicate Tuning, Cooling Baubles, Attrition Orbs, and Dynamic Sway Reduction. Then in the right we have Onslaught, Adagio, One for All, Tap the Trigger, Thermal Atomization, Burning Ambition, and Incandescent. So right off the bat, I do want to mention the combo of Heal Clip Incandescent, which is just your classic solar weapon synergy, and keep in mind that because of the venting mechanic these heat weapons have, proccing Heal Clip is very fluid and easy to do, since all you need is a quick vent after scoring a kill and you've just healed yourself for 120 HP. However, after doing some of my own tinkering, I've decided that there are a couple better rolls worth chasing. To start with, I want to highlight the combo of Gut Shot Straight and Onslaught, because Gut Shot is going to increase your body shot damage by 20% for auto rifles specifically, making the weapon feel a lot more consistent and closing the gap between headshots and body shots. And Onslaught is a great perk to pair with this, because after scoring up to 3 kills, each one will drastically increase the rate of fire of the weapon, and as a result increasing its effective DPS. And when enhanced, Onslaught does last for 5 seconds, which is pretty nice. And overall, this felt like the best combo to me. Alternatively, you could swap Gut Shot for Attrition Orbs, which offers a more support-based role, given you're going to be spawning a bunch of orbs of power, though it is ultimately personal preference. Whatever you choose, I definitely think Onslaught is the go-to perk in the right column. An argument could be made for One for All or Thermal Atomization, but I'd still prefer Onslaught. Before we move on, I also want to stress the importance of having the Ionized Heatsink magazine perk on literally all of these weapons, minus the sword of course, because having it will lower your heat generated stat and allow the weapon to fire for longer than without it. And just as a quick comparison, without Ionized Heatsink, Zealous Ideal is able to fire 56 rounds before overheating, but with Ionized Heatsink this now becomes 72, which is definitely a lot better. So please keep this in mind when farming for your god rolls. Next up is High Tyrant, a void balanced heat pulse rifle that fires at 540 rounds per minute, putting it in the same category as Grid Skipper, Darkest Before, or Oversoul Edict. Taking a look at the perks, in the left column we have Repulsor Brace, Loose Change, Delicate Tuning, Cooling Baubles, Rapid Hit, Destabilizing Rounds, and Demolitionist. And then in the right, Master of Arms, Withering Gaze, Thermal Atomization, Demoralize, Mega Neura, Headseeker, and Frenzy. At first glance we can see that unfortunately Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds are in the same column, so that rules out that combo. However, I believe Bungie are steering people into using Destabilizing Rounds plus another splash perk of their choice, because at least with regards to the left column, nothing can really beat Destabilizing Rounds, so we're definitely taking that. But the question is, what else do we pair with it? Me personally, I think your best bet is either Demoralize or Mega Neura. Demoralize is going to create a weakening explosion every time you score a precision final blow, which is actually really nice this season when paired with all of the void focused artifact perks to allow easy access to Devour on any class. However, I do believe that Mega Neura just about trumps it. Mega Neura is a returning perk which reads, Precision Final Blows create an elemental damage explosion that deals more damage based on the number of precision hits dealt beforehand. And with a pulse rifle, it's really easy to set this perk up due to their burst nature. And as you can see from the clip, some of the explosion numbers are upwards of the 500 mark, which is pretty solid, and from having used this role a bunch during testing, it definitely feels the best. Next we have the Voltaic Shade Arc Balanced Heat Scout Rifle that fires at 260 rounds per minute, aka the rapid fire frame, making it similar to Randy's throwing knife, Unworthy, or Trustee. This weapon is loaded with some seriously solid perks perk options as well as some unique combos we've never seen before. So starting in the left, we have Jolting Feedback, which I believe is the first time we're seeing it in the left column, Delicate Tuning, Cooling Baubles, Trickle Charge, Rapid Hit, Shoot to Loot, and Keep Away. Then in the right column, there's Rolling Storm, Thermal Atomization, Volt Shot, Frenzy, Precision Instrument, Desperate Measures, and also Mega Neura. So right away, we can see that Voltaic Shade is the first ever weapon to have the combo of Jolting Feedback and Volt Shot, which while in principle sounds pretty cool, in practice I think you're much better off with a different role. In my opinion, the better combo is to run Jolting Feedback in column 1, since the rest of the perks don't really offer much, then your choice from either Frenzy or Mega Neura in column 2. And right now I'm definitely leaning more towards Mega Neura since it makes the weapon feel great for AoE ad clear and of course get you the occasional jolt procs from Jolting Feedback here and there. So yes, this would be my recommendation. 260 RPM scouts have always felt really good and Voltaic Shade is no exception. If you're a fan of scouts, then you'll definitely have a good time with this one. Next, we have actually come to the only dynamic heat weapon from the dungeon, and that is the Stasis 140 RPM sniper rifle Conspiracy Honed, making it similar to weapons like the Supremacy or Praedyth's Revenge. But can it compete? Well, let's find out. I'll cut straight to the chase here. This weapon was designed for PvE boss damage, and the reason why this is so painfully obvious is because it gets the combo of Vorpal Weapon and Bait and Switch, making it one of very few weapons to have this coveted double damage perk combo, with the only other ones being Falling Guillotine and Sullen Claw, which is also from the dungeon, but more on that shortly. So, damage. How good is it? Well, for starters, a headshot from the Supremacy, also with Vorpal, deals 517 damage to the head, but with Conspiracy Honed, it deals 775. So for simply existing, Conspiracy Honed deals 50% more damage than a normal non-heat rapid-fire sniper, which is honestly pretty wild. To compensate for this though, Conspiracy Honed has slightly less reserves overall, at least when compared to Supremacy, with it being able to hold 26 bullets total, whereas Supremacy gets 31. In order to get the most out of this weapon, abusing the dynamic heat limiter is key to your success, as well as making sure to have ionized heatsink and enhanced heat generated equipped, because normally without the limiter you're able to fire 4 shots before overheating. However, once you activate the limiter, you can instead fire 11, 12, or even 13 shots depending on timing in a row before overheating, which is very, very good. By the way, in case you weren't aware of how to activate the limiter, and this applies to any dynamic heat weapon by the way, as your weapon cools, pressing the reload key while the heat gauge is within the left-hand rectangle will cause an audible sound cue to play and give you the dynamic heat limiter buff in the bottom hand corner that lasts for around 5 seconds. And firing your weapon during this time consumes a lot less heat than usual. DPS wise, I was able to get it to around 1300 without any buff, debuff, or surges, and for comparison's sake, a Bait and Switch Mint Retrograde under these same conditions deals around 1100 DPS. So this sniper is putting in some serious work. Definitely recommend you grab this god roll first if you care about the endgame or DPS in any general form. Next is Bitter End, an arc balanced heat machine gun that fires at 900 rounds per minute, making it similar to Retrofit Escapade or 21% Delirium. And can I just say that this weapon looks gorgeous. Bungie absolutely killed the aesthetic of these guns and they just look awesome. Anyway, aesthetics aside, is it actually good? Short answer, yeah, it's pretty solid. Perks wise, it doesn't actually have too many typical machine gun perks outside of Killing Tally in the right column, and I'm willing to bet that's just because it's a heat weapon and therefore isn't very traditional. The left column has some interesting additions like Attrition Orbs and Gut Shot Straight, and also Trickle Charge, and the right has Rolling Storm, Frenzy, and Killing Tally as notable options. Overall, because it is a heat weapon and by extension means that it naturally has a form of auto-reloading that a perk like Reconstruction may offer, I do think it is the best arc machine gun we have in the game, and as for my god roll, I would strongly recommend the double damage perk combo of Gut Shot Straight and Killing Tally because it'll simply allow you to mow through ads like nothing. However, do I think it's the best overall machine gun in the game? Probably not. Corrective Measure has better CC perks like destabilizing rounds, as well as access to the Time Lost Magazine origin trait. But Bitter End is still a very solid addition to the machine gun roster, and it's also nice to have a new 900 RPM. We haven't had one since Echoes. Finally, we've come to the last weapon on the roster, and that is the Sullen Claw Void Lightweight Frame Sword, joining the ranks of Quick Fang and Gold Tusk. As I mentioned earlier, Sullen Claw is able to get the double damage perk combo of Vorpal Weapon Bait and Switch. However, if you want my honest opinion, lightweight swords, outside of some really silly game-breaking glitches, are notoriously bad for damage, and the real reason you should be at least somewhat interested in getting yourself this weapon is because it rolls with Eager Edge. Eager Edge is of course the perk that allows your sword attacks to gain massively increased lunge distance for a brief period when initially equipping them, making them excellent choices for movement. And from having used the Sullen Claw a fair amount as my new main movement sword, it feels really nice, especially with the animations when skating with it on Titan. Speaking of skating, when it comes to shatter and well skating, rating, it unfortunately isn't quite as fast. However, it does still retain that feel-good factor for regular fake skates. So if you're a fan of sword movement, I would highly recommend getting yourself this weapon, and also pair Eager Edge with something like destabilizing rounds if you'd like for some bonus anti-barrier capabilities. Shout out to Chaos Reese for that tip. So that has been your guide for the god rolls on all 6 Equilibrium dungeon weapons. Leave a comment down below which weapon you're enjoying the most and what your own personal god rolls are. I'll be sure to read them. And also, if you enjoyed today's guide, then your like and subscription would be very much appreciated. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.